What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, Middlekauff Mailbag time. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. At John Middlekauff, fire in the DMs. Start with Mark. Diehard Lions fan. I had a question about the officiating and how atrocious it's been. The Lions-Bears game on Thanksgiving had a ton of bad calls. How can the NFL take away some of the judgment calls to prevent them from manipulating games? I hate it when close games end on touchy pass interference calls. As a Lions fan, I have PTSD from bad officiating. I think one thing that they tried, what was it, like a year ago? Maybe it was 3 years ago, was you could throw a challenge flag, pass interference, and it was a disaster. I mean, it got canceled after a year. And I also think that they've been very hesitant because Belichick's always been adamant. Why can't we challenge any call? Why can you challenge, a targeting call, or you can challenge a catch, in or out of bounds, but I can't challenge a hold? Like, how do we arbitrarily pick what is challengeable and what is not? And I've always thought there was some merit to that. But I also think the league, and if I was in charge on that side, there is an ebb and a flow to a game that you don't want people constantly going to the monitor. It's one thing that's killed basketball. If you watch a basketball game, the last couple minutes, college or pro, just take too long. And there has to be a flow because football, there's a very distinct play happens, huddle up, play happens. And when you get too much delay, it can really throw off the, I would say, the rhythm of a game. And flags do that in general. I've said forever, officiating and referees in general are a little bit like government officials. The more incompetent you are, it feels like the more you get elevated and you never get fired. Like that's what's always bothered me, in pro sports, especially basketball and football, where so many things are very, very subjective. It's like, yeah, you blow that foul call and it costs me a playoff series and we get bounced and I get fired or I get traded. Or in the NFL, it's like I get cost a couple games because of bad officiating. I get fired or my player gets cut. Nothing happens to these guys. And I don't have an answer. Nothing ever changes. So I've just kind of gotten tired of talking about it because I don't think I don't really see an outcome. Like certain things, it's like I realized yesterday. Every time I fold clothes, like t-shirts or workout clothes or shorts, when I grab them back a day, a week, whenever later, they're always wrinkled. I do not know how to fold clothes. I am guaranteed wash, dry, put in my bucket, take to my bed, fold up, put in the drawers. When I re-grab to wear, that piece of clothing will be wrinkled. When I watch football or when I watch sports in general, like I am prepared for bad calls. It is what it is. It never changes. No matter what I do, roll it up, fold it right, watch a YouTube clip, it's going to be wrinkled. No matter what happens when I'm sitting on the couch, whether I'm betting on the game, whether I'm just enjoying the game, bad calls. It sucks, but it just is what it is. I have a question about the college football playoffs and the bowl games in which they're involved. In your opinion, which bowl game should host the national championship? Personally, I think the championship should be held at the Rose Bowl every year. The granddaddy of them all. It has always felt like the biggest bowl game. What's your take? It's funny, part of these questions, you guys ask things that I've never thought of because I really don't care. As long as the Rose Bowl has a playoff game, it doesn't. You could put the national championship in Arizona, in Jerry's Palace, in New Orleans, in Atlanta. It doesn't matter to me. I don't know why the Rose Bowl is cool. It's actually better as a independent event like a playoff game than it is for UCLA playing way, miles upon miles outside of campus. But it doesn't like if it's in Arizona, which I think was a championship game. They definitely had either one of the two games here last year. Uh, I don't care. I have just to be completely honest, I just don't care. I have a Fugazi Friday. Why are these college football players trying to plant a flag into the turf? I get the symbolism, and I'm not against it. I will say it's a little corny when they attempt to plant the flag, but on the other side, it's also kind of corny that they want to fight about it when they just had 60 minutes to fight. Anyways, the pole can't stick into turf. Yeah, I don't know. I just think everyone's excited. You got that pole, you got the turf. You want to celebrate on opposing, your rival's field, but you're right. No flagpole has ever stuck into the turf. Ever has happened and ever will happen. I think, as someone said, the pitchfork. It might have been my guy Jackson yesterday talking college football because it literally has like kind of spikes kind of stuck in, which would make a little sense. I mean, the flagpole, even Baker Mayfield, when he kind of started this years ago, he just kept hitting it. Again, I enjoy like this is college football. There is no disputing the level of play is better in the NFL, just in terms of the best players at the sport in the world. Now, granted, it's not a worldwide sport, but you know what I mean. Play in the NFL. But there is something, someone sent me, a buddy of mine, Scotty, sent me this clip of Michigan coming out to the Sicario like soundtrack music. It's the movie with there's a couple of them. It's really good. Uh and when Michigan walks out to the to the field on last Saturday at Ohio State and it just kind of opens and you see red everywhere, you're like, this is badass, man. This is the college football atmospheres are second to none. Even for as great as the NFL is, and the NFL has great atmospheres too, like Cleveland, Denver, obviously Lambeau. I mean Philly. I mean there are great places to play. Seattle when they're good, but there is nothing like that. There's nothing like that. The Trevor Lawrence hit is something I agree with you on. It was a bang bang play, and at full speed, I don't think we are asking players to make contortion acts to avoid hitting the quarterback. That said, as a rule change, what do you think about this? Behind the line of scrimmage, the quarterback receives all the normal protections. But once he advances past the line of scrimmage, he is just another runner with no rules or protections, no unique rules or protections. This will incentivize quarterbacks to avoid the collision themselves and allow defenders to actually play and not be confused. Thanks for considering my question. Consider your question considered. I think these guys are so emboldened because they know I can't be touched. We talked about this on the podcast. In what world would it cross your mind as a quarterback to get to the sideline like Caleb did and cut it back? You couldn't have paid any quarterback, Favre to Elway to think of just whoever, Roethlisberger in his prime, to do that. Wait, I'm going to fucking take a hit? But now these guys think, oh, they'll probably pull up and I'll get some extra yards and then I'll slide. That's insane. I'm not blaming Caleb because he's just playing by the rules. Like, I don't blame anyone who I root for accountants to take advantage of the code, right? The code is created and you're following it and you get every loophole humanly possible, right? And if you're within the letter of the law, like he's not breaking, like he's there's no rule in which he is he's breaking by cutting it back in, but he is taking advantage knowing these guys are pulling up. Where in the history of football, you never would have not just kept sprinting to get away because that guy wouldn't stop. And that guy would clean your clock. And we have to kind of rein it in. I'm with you. Pocket quarterbacks protect these guys, want to see it. Even behind the line of scrimmage, like you start running around. Trevor Lawrence is 6'6", 220 pounds. Trevor Lawrence does not run a 6'0" 40. He runs like, 4'6'5". At that size, like that is big. That's like a tight end. Tight end's a little bigger in terms of weight, maybe 235, 240 pounds, but that's moving. And he's sliding last second. Like you said, Alshire's coming full speed. Also, I'm not against diving head first in a situation like that because no one's going to touch you. They'll just tap you. But when you kind of slide because you're standing up and you wait till the last second, like it brings everything into play. The most egregious by a mile though is any fake slide or fake go out of bounds. Keep going. That's you deserve to get destroyed on that. Caleb's got lucky he didn't get his leg snapped. Question for the bag. If you're the Lions this upcoming offseason, okay, see, we're already into March. What do you do about Jameson Williams? Brad Holmes has been a spectacular drafter for the Lions, but I feel his play has not been worthy of a first-round pick. Plus, trade up to get him. Plus, they traded up to get him. The Lions knew they were punting on his rookie season due to the knee injury, but afterwards, between the suspensions, online sports gambling, 23 PEDs, violation this season, and I think he just I actually think he got off on the gun thing, right? There were two guns in the car. He claimed like he didn't have the concealed carry. I don't even know the rules in Michigan. Obviously, not an ideal situation in the middle of the night. And I'm not anti-guns here. But in all these players have every right, just like I have a right, you have a right to fucking be packing heat. And depending on the state you live in, like I could walk into Safeway right now, and this is a open carry state. So it's like I'm not your media member pushing against that. I do not care. I grew up in a home with way more guns than people, but I do think you have to be smart about what you're doing. And if you're Jameson Williams, like we got to make some better decisions. I think anytime you take a player like him that I would say is pretty unique. Like he's going to be a speed, stretch the field. He's not going to be some total package, right? And the way you guys build your offense, you just need him to stretch the field, and his speed is elite. The moment I thought on Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving moment, way worse than anything happened with his brother getting pulled over by a mile. It's like, because one, I don't even know if they're breaking the law. Two, like the thing on Thanksgiving, throwing the fucking ball into the guy's face and then coming to the sideline and looking at Antoine Randall and telling him that it sure looked like he was trying to convince him that I was throwing it to the ref. And Antoine Randall was not having any of it. And he was begging and pleading, and Antoine Randall is losing. It was incredible. It was the coolest coach player moment of Thanksgiving by a wide margin. It was awesome. But it's like, bro, what are you doing? And then Dan Campbell said after the game that he apologized to the team. Feels like he's doing a lot of apologizing. Like, I'm not a huge, like, listen, you screw up once. It's one thing if you're a child, but like, once we get to business and you work with people, like, listen, we make a mistake. You don't need to apologize all the time. We're just on to the next, fucking get it done. No one gives a fuck. Like, don't need your hand held. Same thing with the NFL. Like, if you're constantly apologizing, like, we got problems. If you apologize more than you make plays, like if that's the ratio, your status for the team is going to be up in the air. Now, he definitely has value. Like the Kansas City Chiefs. Would they trade for him? Because I think they would. You know, that's the type guy, Andy Reid. He's 23 years old. This is his third season. He's having a career year. Now, granted, like you said, his rookie year didn't even count. He had one catch, barely played toward the end of the season. Last year, in 12 games, he had 24 catches and 2 touchdowns. It's crazy. And he had a rushing touchdown. This year, he's got 30 catches, 4 touchdowns. I'll give him this. In his 30 catches, he's averaged 20 yards a catch. Like, he is a really explosive player. Like, would you just trade him? It sucks, but like, you got to go a little spilled milk. Like, it's over. Nothing you're going to do. Do you trade him to the Chiefs for like a 3rd round pick? Because I would the Chiefs trade a 2nd round pick? Now, if that pick is like 60, I might. I'd sure think about it. It'd be risky, but he makes more sense with the Chiefs than he does. One, his style of play. It was like when Tyreek Hill first got there with the Chiefs. with Alex, who your quarterback is as a speed demon does impact your ability. One thing Tua does, he throws a pretty good deep ball, right? So Tyreek makes sense with him, even though he doesn't have the arm strength of Patrick Mahomes. Now, he doesn't have a great deep ball when it gets cold and windy, but if it's not cold and windy, he throws a good deep ball. To me, he's got traded to the Chiefs written all over him. You get Jameson, Williams, Worthy. Maybe you resign DeAndre Hopkins. Rashee Rice comes back. All of a sudden, your offense looks a little more explosive. And you can just listen. You tried. You got aggressive. Move on. Jameson Williams, too, like you said, you traded up. He was the 12th pick in the draft. Looking back, he was at Ohio State, and he wasn't as good as who'd they have? Jackson Smith. Harrison would have been really young. They had one other wide receiver, too. I can't think of off the top of my head. Oh, Garrett Wilson. So it's like, well, he wasn't as good as those two guys. Those guys are good, right? So it's like, those guys make sense. Why he couldn't beat out, it's like, you ain't playing here. It's like, yeah, we got this guy named Jackson Smith. We got Marvin Harrison, who's a 17-year-old, and we got Garrett Wilson. You're not going to play, my man. Which, in theory, it's easy to justify. It's like, well, he couldn't play there. And now looking back, it's like, well, it's kind of a problem. You drafted this guy 12th, coming off a knee injury. It's like, well, yeah, he couldn't play there because those guys are really good players who were also drafted in a similar range. Jackson Smith goes what? Like pick 20? Garrett goes pick 10. This guy goes 12. It's like, yeah, those guys are on a different level than him. Same with Marvin. The NFL season is rolling along and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And it's the number one place to bet touchdowns. Long bombs, fades to the end zone, big runs, you name it. We do not care how you get them. We just want to bet touchdowns at DraftKings, and it's the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your first pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance on their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets. If your bet wins, just bet $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Why do you think the Broncos refused to put Surtain on Jeudy last night? It seems like a no-brainer to match arguably the number one corner in the league to the opposing team's number one wide receiver. Could it possibly be because Surtain and Jeudy are ex-teammates and good friends, or is it an overall skill thing? I didn't watch any of the post-game press conference, or maybe Sean, I'm recording this on Wednesday, has talked about it. I guess this week they're on a bye, so I don't even know if he's talking on Wednesday like it's like a normal game week. I don't think them being friends, obviously, they played together at Alabama, has anything to do with it. I think it's a scheme-specific thing. They have a game plan. But it did feel like after 3 or 4 of the big plays, like, what are we doing, guys? Listen, it's one thing, your defense a little gassed. You're not going to have as good of a game as you normally have. It's another thing where literally this guy's wide open constantly. What's Elijah Moore going to kill you? It's like, it's kind of one of those things like, hey, Steph Curry's not hitting the shot. Someone else has to hit it. Like, eventually it's like, let's cover Jerry Jeudy. Njoku only gets 10, 15 yards around the line of scrimmage, right? He's not running go routes. And Elijah Moore is like a possession receiver. I got Jeudy going deep on me. And if Jameis hadn't missed him on the one, Jerry Jeudy could have had like 350 yards. Jameis could have easily had 600 yards of offense. So I don't know. You'd have to, my guess, not has anything to do with the personal, friends, all about scheme and the game plan. I'm also a lifelong Ohio State hater. Here's my take. Ohio State football is the Kentucky basketball of the sport. They are more a collection of individual talents than a collection of a football team. Their focus is clearly on recruiting and showcasing the most blue chip prospects that they can, and having those prospects go and succeed in the NFL. The fans clearly care about on-the-field results. But it seems like the coaching staffs care more about having shiny toys so they can show a track record of future success to make it easier to recruit the next batch. It seems like the exact same problem Calipari had at Kentucky when he continuously lost to teams that had focused on developing an actual team. You could argue that like that wasn't the case with Urban Meyer. Like he built teams. Obviously, he built uh, teams that had higher level recruits, but they were excellent. Like that team that beat Alabama with shotgun Cardale Jones, they were elite on defense, right? From Joey Bosa to Darren Lee to their DBs, like they were a unit on defense. I think Ryan Day can build an offense. Now they made the wrong decision, probably a quarterback that like, yeah, it was easy to point the finger at Kyle McCord, but I think Kyle McCord, as we sit here today, is just a better player than Will Howard. And if it was 2014, you would have had no choice. Like Kyle McCord still would have been on the team. And even if Will Howard could have transferred, like, is he beating him out? And even then, the transfer rules, he would have had to sit out a year. So without the transfer portal, I think Kyle McCord is still the quarterback and they're better off. Now they don't have some of these other players that they got, like Caleb Downs and stuff. So it goes both ways. I think it's more of a reflection of Ryan Day. I think what you're talking about specifically is Ryan Day and Calipari. I think Ryan Day recruits like Calipari does in football or in basketball. Of I want the wide receivers and I want the offense. Because defensively, I never really hated him till Ryan Day took over. Like I'm not a big Urban Meyer guy, but I respect his teams. And under Tressel, like they would have like every unit would have NFL guys. Now you're watching their team, like, yeah, Caleb Downs, their best defender, but he just came from Alabama, wasn't their guy. So the best players on their team are their wide receivers, which most of my life, Ohio State, dominant offensive and defensive lines, unreal linebackers, great running backs. Now the running backs are good now, but like, where's like Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa and Chase Young? Where are those players? The dude that the Browns just drafted this year in the second round, I forget his name. He got in trouble in training camp. So I think it's a Ryan Day thing. Like Kirby doesn't do that. I think he doesn't know how to, I would say, recruit defense. How would he? He's never been. I mean, he got handed the job. How does Kirby know how to recruit defense? I don't know. He coached under Nick Saban for most of his life, and he's a defensive guy. I'd argue this. Quarterback's hard. Quarterback's hard. But I bet most people listening to this, if I picked 5 listeners and I said, we're going to run the recruiting for, let's just pick USC this year, me and 5 guys, I think it'd be pretty hard to screw up the skill guys. We would be, if you are swimming in the deep end of the pool and I got access and I got NIL to the best wide receivers and running backs, we ain't going to miss. We're going to get NFL prospects at 17 years old. Defensive players are a little harder because their wiring, their mindset, obviously they have to fit certain requirements of height, weight, speed, right? You're not going to play Power 5 football at defensive end and be 5'10". But I'm just saying, like, what makes Nick and Joey and some of these guys so good aren't just, right, just their size. It's also a mindset and a toughness. And like, does Ryan Day even know what that looks like? I don't think so. Chip Kelly does not. So I think it's a more reflection. It's Kentucky basketball. It was John Calipari basketball. So he's John Calipari. But John has a long resume of, like, listen, we can nitpick John in the tournament. John's pretty good at his job. Is Ryan? I don't know. Also, Calipari's won a national championship. Been a long time listener to the pod, but have never sent in a question but the mailbag, but here it is. Given how Bryce Young has rebounded since becoming a starter, do you think the Panthers should give him another year to develop, see what he brings to completely start over a quarterback in the draft? So he sent me some stats. Basically, Bryce Young has led the Panthers to back-to-back wins for the first time since 21. Baker Mayfield said, I'm proud of him. This guy has the potential to do anything he wants to do. Bryce Young has an 84.6 passer rating, third in the NFL the last 5 weeks. He has almost 900 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Bryce Young is 100% Panthers quarterback next year. Completely resurrected his career. I still have reservations with a guy that size. And in a weird way, because they were so shitty, you kind of get to fly. Like there's not much pressure on your team. But if you just watch him in a vacuum, he's played much better. He's played like a real player. I talked to a scouting buddy the other day, and it was like, I'm not going to make like bold statements on Bryce Young, but he's a real NFL player right now. That could not be said when he got benched for Andy Dalton. He hadn't been a real NFL player. He'd been playing in games, but he was like, if he wasn't the number one overall pick and had been a late round pick, or not, he would have been benched. He would have been cut. This guy's a real player. And 1,000%, if he keeps maintaining, I would say, this level of play, they won't even entertain drafting a quarterback high, which should be very, very positively taken if you look at where they were 6 games ago. I appreciate everyone that listens on Spotify that has linked me on, on the thing. I guess I'm an Apple podcast guy, but I know on Spotify that, every maybe the calendar year for them ends December 1st, and you guys link that has 3 and Out with, from everyone to Coward to Joe Rogan to you name it, every big podcast. So I appreciate everyone that has sent me those on Instagram. I'm a big Ravens fan. And despite being 8-5, I still feel really good about our chances. Tucker has, in my opinion, lost us 4 games this year. And the defense has been playing better of late since they moved Hamilton back to deep safety. I really feel the Ravens should be 11-2 or 12-1. But penalties and uncharacteristically bad special teams have cost us dearly. Do you think that since the Ravens won't go into the postseason as the best team in football, that it might take some pressure off Lamar? I think it adds pressure because you assume, your defense still is nowhere near what it was. Part of the reason there was so much pressure on Lamar last year is like, you have the best defense. You're the MVP and you have the best defense in football. Like, if I tell you over the last 40 years, I get the quarterback who's the MVP of the league and his defense has the best defense in football and you're the number 1 seed, will you pick them to win the Super Bowl? You would take them every time. If I told you the playoffs are starting, regardless if you got to go through Joe Montana, Elway, Brady, Favre, Rod, you name it. I don't give a shit. The Mahomes. If I got the MVP of the league and the best defense in the league, I will take my chances every day of the week. Like, you have a kicker that's not reliable right now. So these football games, even look last year against the Chiefs, they scored 17 points. So if you had played better, maybe you win the game 20-17. But typically, how do you get 20 points? Score a couple touchdowns and get 2 field goals. Can you rely on this guy to kick field goals right now? And I saw Belichick say that, and he's right. It's not like Tucker's balls are you going 30 yards and diving into the ground or hitting the center in the back of the ass. It is flying in the air. But Belichick, being the football savant that he is, he's like, the thing about Justin Tucker is he didn't hit a hook or a fade. He hit straight balls. It went dead straight. And if you watch him now, he's hooking them left and he's cutting it and slicing it right. So clearly, and I know nothing about kicking, but that was honestly one of the most insightful things I've heard about Justin Tucker. Because it's easy for us. Yeah, he's missing kicks. But for Belichick, who's obviously played this guy and the Ravens in a ton of big games the last decade plus, I would, if I had to guess, several playoff games, 5-6 regular season games. I mean, and Belichick is like, gets horny for kickers. Like, if Belichick right now, beside John Harbaugh, could give by far of anyone in the NFL, any coach, any position, the best scouting report on Justin Tucker. And him saying that was like, damn, that's a good point. Because some guys naturally play a little cut, naturally play a little draw. Justin Tucker straight ball. Now it's going all over. So clearly he's in his own head. I don't know if you fix that in December. Because it's not like he just got in his own head after 1 week. It's been an accumulation. These playoff games all come down to a point or two. Because like you say, you have a good chance. Oh, yeah. I mean, you got a good team. So you can win a playoff game. But if you are the 6th seed, you are going to have to win 3 road games just to get to the Super Bowl. And I do think it's fair to say, even if your team kicks ass in one game, so let's say you win one game by 15 points, like pretty easily. The other 2 games are probably going to be a 1-score game. Hell, one of those games you're going to be down probably in the second half. You are going to rely on your kicker. So you could argue the kicker is a bigger issue than your defense. If your defense, like you said, just listen, how many points you give up to the Eagles? It's not like they scored 50 points. So your defense definitely looked better in that game. Your defense was not the problem. Honestly, you guys were holding Saquon pretty well until he busted a couple second half runs. Okay, last question. Question for the bag. Being a Patriot fan, I'm super excited about what we've seen so far from May. That being said, I'm concerned about what I've seen from the rest of the team. Don't blame me. The defense was supposed to be elite, but now it's looking like the defense of the past were a product of Belichick. The roster is brutal. Is there any chance that they can get the roster turned around next year, or are we so far behind player-wise that we won't be in the conversation for multiple years? Well, it's a good question because, and this is the thing where Belichick and Mayo kind of went back and forth, right? And the Belichick supporters say, well, they extended a lot of the dudes on defense that were our guys. And rightfully so. Why wouldn't they? The defense has been pretty good. So you would want Barmore, you would want Duggar, obviously Christian Gonzalez, a young player, but you want him, you want that core group of guys on your squad. The defense is not necessarily going to change, but we've seen those players be solid before. Offensively, you guys are putrid. I mean, offensively, you're really bad. The offensive line is awful. I would say this offseason, 2 things should happen. Hey, because you're going to have cap space. Buy some skill guys. Buy some players. And listen, sometimes you got to overpay. But the Jags, remember a couple years ago, overpaid for Christian Kirk. It's like, yeah, do I want to pay Kirk $18 million a year? Would I rather pay him 12? Of course, but it was clear like right away, Kirk's a pretty good player. So if you can do a couple moves like that with a wide receiver, tight end, you tried it a couple years ago with Jonnu and Hunter Henry, buy a tight end, buy a couple wide receivers, and then just draft offensive linemen. I would draft offensive linemen with like every pick. Because part of what made Brady and Dante Scarnecchia and Belichick and Josh, like their offensive line always felt solid. Even when they had guys that they were overachieving with. And listen, I remember like as a Fresno State guy, Ryan Wendell, who was starting for you guys in the early 2010s, in your Super Bowl team. Like that's crazy. It's like Ryan Wendell starts for the Patriots, but they could take these tough, smart guys and make them into solid starters. And obviously over the years from Logan Mankins, also Fresno State guy, and Matt Light, like you guys have had really good players as well, but you could mix and match some high-end talents with some like overachieving guys, and then Brady and Josh and Dante, it was just a well-run operation. It never felt like, for the most part, obviously you had the 1 year I think Dante retired, and I forget the guy's name, but Belichick hired this guy, and he lasted 1 year. He got fired. I think it was the year you guys lost to Denver in the AFC Championship game, which in fairness, like that was a tough matchup for you guys. Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, Wolf, and Malik Jackson. Like, shit, I mean, you could have an offensive line full of 5 Trent Williams, and that defensive line is going to be a problem. But, like, Dante coming back helped you out. I do think you got to invest there. I would spend my money, even if I quote-unquote got to overpay, skill guys. Hell, look at Saquon, Josh Jacobs. Running backs become available on the open market. Running backs, fullbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and draft offensive linemen. I think your first pick, I don't have like an updated big board and haven't really been asking guys in the league in terms of offensive linemen, but typically every year there's a couple offensive tackles that are worthy of a top. Last year was a really good year. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Would have to ask around, but I think you got to be ideally you take an offensive tackle high, like you get your Lane Johnson, your Trent Williams, your Panay Sewell, like that's, and then the second round draft your Landon Dickerson or Logan Mankins, get a guard or a center or Quentin Nelson or whoever, you know. So I get a tackle and a guard. I would take those two positions in the first two rounds. That would be my goal coming into the draft. Can I get a starting tackle and a starting guard? And in the third round, it's like I might take another guard or tackle, or vice versa. Take back to back tackles and then a guard or center. I would be very aggressive with offensive linemen. So that's probably to me the key. But like the roster is pretty shitty. I mean, part of the reason Belichick took a lot of shit, not because he was a bad coach, awful GM, and didn't leave him a lot of talent on offense was putrid. Mac Jones sucks, but the offense he was playing with wasn't that good either. So appreciate everyone for listening. Share with your friends, share with your enemies. We will talk tomorrow after the Thursday night game. Lions and Packers. Can't wait for that bad boy. Have a good day. Talk soon. See ya.